In game development, there are often two routes developers can follow. They can walk the simple and easy path, creating games and genres and with tools with which they are familiar. And there's nothing wrong with that. As the saying goes, stick with what you know. But oftentimes a developer can take the long way around, following a road they do not know just to see where it ends up. And infrequently, these developers become trailblazers, and the fruits of their journey is something remarkable. Such is the case with Guerrilla Games' Horizon Zero Dawn, a game created by a team with little to no experience in how to approach a genre. In 2011, after shipping their latest shooter, Killzone 3, Amsterdam-based developer Guerrilla Games looked internally for ideas for their next project. They asked their employees to pitch ideas for new intellectual properties that could enter development for Sony's next-generation console, the PlayStation 4. According to game director Matthias de Jonge, Guerrilla's employees presented nearly 40 concepts to the company's leadership, which was then narrowed down to just 3 or 4 that could be feasibly developed. This was later parsed down to only 2, one which was prudent, described as the right choice for the developer, and an open-world title codenamed Horizon. This pitch was sold as a pretty fresh mix of ingredients, the BBC nature documentary kind of feel, and then the sci-fi elements with the robots. In the end, Guerrilla committed to developing Horizon in 2011 because it was the bigger risk. It was a genre the team had little experience in, and they'd basically have to start from scratch. Initially, a small team of just 10 people were assigned to work on prototypes for Horizon, which was later increased to around 15 or 20 as early development continued. The rest of Guerrilla's staff focused their efforts on a new installment of their Killzone franchise, Shadowfall, to launch alongside the PlayStation 4. Amongst the first prototypes built for Horizon was a crude interpretation of what would become the game's iconic Thunderjaw enemy. Originally in these first demos, de Jonge described the Thunderjaw as just a series of shapes resembling Lego blocks cobbled together with ugly, jerky animations. Many of the ideas built during this early phase of development would become integral in Horizon's final product. After work on Shadowfall was completed and the game went gold, the rest of Guerrilla's team joined in on the development of Horizon. However, the transition from the shooter to their new title wasn't as smooth as they'd hoped. In what the team described as a major uh-oh moment, they realized very quickly that they didn't know how to approach Horizon because very few of them had experience in open-world role-playing games. Art director Jan Bart van Beek went so far as to describe it as a harsh 180-degree turn for the company, and the entirety of Horizon's 5-year development cycle was a constant learning experience for most everyone involved. In the end, new talent had to be hired, including a team of quest designers and writer John Gonzalez, who had previously worked on Bethesda's Fallout New Vegas. Because many of the main concepts of the game were already in place with Horizon's initial pitch, its setting, tribalistic human characters, and robotic dinosaurs, Gonzalez's main job was to create a connective tissue for a cohesive narrative. The quest design team then took that narrative and broke it down into chunks for the purposes of the gameplay. De Jonge credits their work on those early demos for keeping the project together on the whole. Even if a majority of Guerrilla's developers were unfamiliar with open-world games, a foundation had been laid, which allowed for the team to start building the world of Horizon. He explained, "I think it's actually has been really good that we have been able to define all of the rules of how this world operates. Because it has such crazy elements mixed together, we wanted to make it feel like it was believable." The difference in genre between Horizon and the Killzone franchise presented several additional challenges for the team, who were used to setting up an encounter and being able to predict exactly how a player would progress through it, simply because they had control over where and when the player would enter the area. In an open-world game like Horizon, however, the player could approach an encounter from any direction they saw fit. Additionally, the team built the game using their in-house Decima game engine, one originally designed for the dank passageways of a corridor-based shooter like Killzone. Several aspects of the engine had to be tweaked to work in the larger, open spaces of Horizon. Still, their familiarity with the tools of the engine did ease several potential problems with development. The team also wanted to have a solid bedrock established with their story and universe, drafting many potential narratives very early into development. De Jonge said in total they wrote roughly 20 different stories, some with different and in many cases multiple player characters. In the end, a common thread was established. The title would take place roughly 1,000 years in the future with animalistic robots roaming the world. Thematically, the team wanted to push for ideas of primitive tribalism with its human characters. The universe they built was lush, full of beauty and majesty, and they wanted dangerous scenarios to juxtapose that. Producer Mark Norris explained, "What if humanity is not at the top of the life list anymore? What would that feel like? What would that look like?" That drew a lot of the other elements around it. To ensure a somewhat realistic world, Guerrilla's writers consulted with real-life anthropologists in an attempt to predict how human civilization would degrade over a millennia, and to recreate accurate tribalistic societies. Interestingly, despite experimenting with dozens of ideas for playable characters, the team decided to proceed with the main character included with the original pitch for Horizon, a woman named Aloy, voiced by actress Ashley Birch in the title's final release. Because Guerrilla Games had previously worked on combat-centric FPS games like the Killzone franchise, the company's managing director Herman Holst believes that Horizon was filled with incredibly intense combat, something he feels the studio is very good at. Aspects were borrowed from Killzone's mechanics, including the ability to damage certain parts of an enemy's body. For example, you could injure their knee, forcing them to fall to the ground where they would be more easily defeated. And this idea was taken to the logical extreme with the robotic enemies of Horizon, allowing players to pry off individual armor plates. Emphasis was also placed on Horizon's RPG systems. The development team wanted the player to have to build their character up to fully explore the world and face some of the harsher threats in the game. For example, that Thunderjaw enemy is not one intended to be taken on at lower levels. In fact, the team believes a player would have a pretty bad time if they were inclined to do so. However, weaker enemies and easier quest objectives were placed throughout the world to let the player build up to those challenges. Additionally, the team didn't want to include any explicit tutorials, instead desiring the player to discover what works and what doesn't for themselves through trial and error. Still, Guerrilla didn't want their progression system to feel like that of a typical RPG. Norris explained that in games like the similar Elder Scrolls titles Morrowind and Oblivion, enemies in the world tend to level up with your character, providing a consistent challenge. Guerrilla, however, decided to switch things up, splicing in easy and difficult enemies throughout the entirety of the map. In addition to being more realistic, a lot of the challenge in Horizon could potentially come from the player hunting weaker monsters while avoiding some of the more powerful enemies early on. Then, once the player is more powerful, they could take on those stronger enemies. This also meant that the player wouldn't be able to return to early areas of the title and God mode through them, as one of the developers put it. Work on Horizon progressed normally for most of its development cycle, with Sony investing $47 million into the project. Of course, though being a massive AAA game under development at a studio owned by one of the big three console publishers, several prying eyes looked on the development of Horizon. This resulted in several major leaks, the most significant occurring in September of 2014, when several pieces of concept art in the title Horizon was leaked onto a Chinese message board. Horizon Zero Dawn was officially revealed at Sony's E3 2015 press conference, and then later released in North America on February 28, 2017. It was released in Europe the following day. Critical reception for the title was overwhelmingly positive, with critics praising Guerrilla's approach to the open-world genre, storytelling, enemy designs, and the characterization of Aloy. As of the making of this documentary, Horizon was one of the most successful new IPs launched for Sony on the PlayStation 4, with 2.4 million units moved. And the game even outsold Nintendo's similar Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild during its first week of release in the United Kingdom. Horizon has so far been the biggest launch for Sony since Uncharted 4. In every way possible, Horizon was a risk. An open-world RPG made by FPS developers. A strange and colorful world in a landscape of gray and brown shooters. And a new intellectual property in an industry that favors the pre-established. But taking that scenic route worked for Guerrilla Games and their new franchise, and personally, I can't wait to see where they take it. And us next. Heyo, thanks for checking out our look back at the development of Horizon Zero Dawn. If you have any suggestions for retrospectives like this in the future, please don't be afraid to comment them below or tweet them at me at Forrest first. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to The Theorists for more retrospectives, theories, and culture analyses in the future. Got some fun stuff planned this summer. I'm looking forward to it. Now I'm going to go jump in a portal and go research this next video. See you guys next time.